We will call to order this meeting of the South Carolina Commission on Disabilities and Special Needs. And I would ask Commissioner Blackwood to read the notice of meeting statement at this time.
Okay. A meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of the April 15th, 2021 Commission meeting was distributed April 13th, 2021 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs at Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Thank you. The first item would be the adoption of the agenda. As proposed, there's one item that we do not need to have on there, and that is under the executive session. There are no legal matters to be discussed, so we will be striking that from the proposed agenda. With anything beyond that, anybody else have any modifications, changes to the agenda as proposed? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved, Chair.
We have a second.
Second.
Mr. Rawlinson, I heard you first. As you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda as proposed is adopted. The next item on that is the invocation, and I would recognize Commissioner Thomas for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time we can meet together to discuss and act on important issues that affect so many thousands of individuals. Give us insight and wisdom, we pray. In your gracious name, amen.
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 Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the proposed commission meeting minutes from the March 18th and March 23rd meetings that the commission held. Everyone should have had a chance to review this ahead of time. Does anybody have any changes, additions, or corrections to the minutes as proposed? Hearing none, would entertain a motion to approve both those sets of minutes as proposed.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, those are both approved, and with thanks as always to staff for preparing those. The next item on the agenda is the commissioner's update. Does any commissioner have an update they wish to present?
Mr. Blackwood and I do.
Okay, who wants to go first?
Robin, you want to go first?
Yeah. Yes. Yesterday, Commissioner Rawlinson and myself were up at this office, and we walked around and met some of the employees here to really thank them for their service, especially during a really trying time, the last year of COVID and changes. And we just met some amazing people yesterday. We wanted to thank them publicly again for their service to this agency, to our consumers, and their dedication. And one particular employee that we met, her name is Lynn Branham. She is celebrating 53 years of service at DDSN in June. We were blown away by this significant milestone in an approaching anniversary of 53 years. And we have just a little information to share about her. She began her career on June 16th, 1968 as an administrative assistant, formerly referred to as a clerk. At the time, Lynn and her colleagues gathered data pertaining to individuals with intellectual disabilities residing in state-operated institutions. The department at that time was located on Main Street in Columbia. The information compiled by Lynn and her colleagues would culminate in the agency's first formal waiting list for deinstitutionalization. In the 1970s, Lynn provided administrative support to directors of community services and residential services, respectively. Later, she was assigned to support the deputy commissioner of the agency, maintaining responsibilities for tracking those awaiting community-based services. Lynn is responsible for tracking Today, Lynn is responsible for tracking residential services expenditures for children and adults in alternative placements. In addition, she is principally responsible for executing intergovernmental transfers and cost recoupments with other state agencies. Over the years, Lynn has promised her husband, Jerry, of 53 years, she plans to retire. To date, the agency has successfully persuaded Lynn to stay just a few more months. And we just want to publicly thank her, and we just had some flowers, a little gift to give her today for all that she has done. So she is in the back here, and she just stepped in.
I'll follow up on what Lynn said. It was quite a pleasure yesterday to walk around and actually talk with our employees and get to know them. They are an amazing group of people, and we are so blessed. And I don't think this commission a lot of times recognizes that, because a lot of us are new and have not, and because of COVID, we've been shuffled in and shuffled out. I don't think we've been given the opportunity a lot of times to go and meet these wonderful folks that are actually doing the work of DDSN. And we just want you to know how much we appreciate you. 53 years, I'm only 50 years old. So if that gives anybody, bless your heart. I appreciate you, and I just want you to know how much we appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so
It's a
much.
pleasure.
You're so welcome. Thank you. That's.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
May I add one thing? Commissioner Miller and I have been discussing, and actually we set a time for it, but some conflicts came up and we weren't able to do it last month. And I invite any of you all and commissioners that want to go, we were going to just go out and visit now that maybe we can get out relative to a little better safety to some of the providers. Let them know we're coming and ask if we can come and just say hello and find out what their needs are. And I'd just like to say to anybody listening, it's easy to get in touch with commissioners, and I've been on for a year and a half now, and I've only had 1 or 2 phone calls or emails, and then related phone calls from that have said, we think you ought to be aware of, or hear some needs, and maybe the commission is unaware of, or whatever. I mean, I think every person on this commission, from what I can tell, in the past year and a half that I've been on the commission, would savor such opportunities to talk to you all. So please don't find yourself in the position of being nervous about talking to us, or there's some consequences that would be. That's not that at all. I had a communication from one group, as a matter of fact, down in Charleston, about how the disbursement of monies took place and how they got shorted from that. And I was good. I mean, that's the kind of thing we need to take back to staff and try to get to the bottom of that sort of thing. So if anybody out there is listening, I don't know how many we have listening. It might be nobody for all I know, but I have been told it can be up to hundreds of individuals and entities. Please don't be nervous about contacting the commissioners, because we're here to help. We're here to be eyes and ears and action. So we want to be proactive. We're not aloof. Just go online. You'll find how to get in touch. And if I see somebody's ask for my participation, I'll call them right away. So I'll look forward to hearing from you. But I got the idea the last month or two that maybe some folks didn't think or thought we were sort of aloof and difficult to talk to. That I don't think is the case at all. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anything further?
I just want to say real quick that since it's not really on the agenda, it don't really need to be, but just as a place to put it, the communications committee is still looking for everybody's bios and pictures if anybody has any, and we would ask that the IT department go ahead and get started if they could on the ones that they do have to get the website straight for the commission page, and I hope that at some point we'll consider letting opening this up so that people can come back to, a limited number of people can come back in here and visit us, and we can get the video going so people can see us in person as opposed to having to hear my voice, having to hear other people's voices, because mine is stronger than some of the people in here, so they have an easier time hearing me. And they probably would be better off to hear somebody like Robin who has a less voice than me. But go ahead.
Well, I would just say that yesterday when Commissioner Rawlinson and I were visiting, meeting people face to face yesterday, that they made a great point. Like, they don't know what any of us look like. They're not able to come to these meetings. They can only hear our voice. We're not on the website. So that kind of ties into what you're saying, as well as what Commissioner Thomas is saying. When people don't know who we are, what we look like, and only what we sound like, that's not ideal. So thanks for bringing that up.
How long do we think it will be before we have video back up?
Because we used to have video and when we had the public meetings, you could at least see us sitting at a table on the video. And now we're only audio, and I'm just not sure why that switched when we were just still in.
It wasn't a general, I mean, we just broadcast to the specific locations. It wasn't web-based, I think was the difference. Right. We used to broadcast to, I know, for example, York had a broadcast. You could go to the York office and watch us, but it wasn't just a general web-based thing, and that may be the difference.
Well, it still could be to them.
Yeah, no.
Took a web-based event to
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just, as far as the speculation as to why we don't do the video anymore, I think that might be why. Yeah.
It might not be a bad idea to have IT come in sometime and you can ask them these kind of questions themselves. But I've never seen that person except once that's in charge of IT.
We can certainly make sure we invite them the next time we bring this particular topic up, or put them on the agenda for next month. Especially as we try to move to.
I think the director can look into that.
Yeah. So
well, we'd like them to, but we'd also like IT to get moving.
And ultimately, we got to make a decision as far as when we reopen again. I still think that the guidelines are saying that we still need to keep the numbers fairly low. And I think that's what we're trying to follow still is the guidelines, even though the vaccination spread is permeating a lot more. I think we're still following the CDC guidelines on that.
Okay.
But, okay. Anything else? All right. Yeah, no problem. The next item on the agenda was public input. I was informed there is no public input requested for today. So we can move on to the committee reports. And so we'll first recognize Commissioner Blackwood regarding the Finance and Audit Committee.
Thank you. Under tab 3, you will see documentation that Pat provided us on in advance of our Finance and Audit Committee meeting with a lot of great detail. So thank you for providing that, Pat. And we went through that in our Finance and Audit Committee meeting. And out of that committee meeting, we unanimously approved the agency purchasing 10 ADA compliant wheelchair vans and buses for approximately $674,650. These were quotes for several vehicles for the regional centers through the state contract pricing. We reviewed all the details and approved the purchase of that. So I think for today, Gary, it's bringing that motion to the committee, and of course we can answer any questions anybody has about this if you have any.
So the first motion coming out of committee would be treated as a motion and a second to approve those purchases. Does anybody have any questions for the committee or staff about that? Hearing none, would entertain a vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that is approved unanimously.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is under tab 4, and it was the fiscal year third quarter summary of provider contracts. This was just provided to us in the committee meeting and by Pat, and it was informational only. There was no motion that came out of this, but it was just the general summary that we have asked for as a commission from finance and on this topic. So the one note that I'll mention, just as a reminder, since we see this quarterly, the item under purpose oftentimes would list an initial like JAST, and that is the initial of an individual. So these are, if the line item has information there about someone's spot being terminated, it would be the person's initials for privacy at the various centers and through the different providers. So that is just informational only, and just to share today on the contracts. Pat, anything more on that you would think I should share or elaborate on? I think that was.
I just think the purpose is to notify if there's any increase of $200,000. I think it's what we're normally checking, and it was just
Right.
kind of a odd quarter because we took the P's and I's out, we went down to $50 million. So it's kind of a one-time unusual quarter, but I know no capacity increases for providers other than voluntary changes. I think that's the big issue, increased capacity. I think next time we will have one. I think we're really people from private, state-funded.
That's correct. We're depopulating a facility where we use 100% state funds for individuals involved with the criminal justice system. So unique population, but it's going to be value added for the agency, but more importantly, give them a better quality of life.
And in the waiver system where it's Medicaid matched. That'll be next quarter.
Okay, great. Anybody have any questions or need additional information on this? This was just, again, informational only for the commission.
Are we submitting it for a motion to be approved by the commission?
No, we're
It's
not.
just information.
Okay.
Yeah, no motion for this.
Okay.
Just information that will allow us to review some of the things that happen within a quarter for the contracts and stuff and changes. Broken out by location. So the next item then, we'll move on if no one has any questions or wants to drill down on that even further. The final item that we were going to share from that meeting, committee meeting, is the discussion of the financial audit. So we discussed the benefits of having a financial audit of the agency based on the recent change of the CFO leaving this agency. We feel it is good housekeeping, best practices, not only here, but in many other places when a CFO leaves, that financial audit is warranted. So I think today we just want to get the full, want to take a vote, I think, on advancing that. We in the committee, we did unanimously approve moving forward with an audit, a financial audit. And so today we're just bringing it here to the full commission for a vote. So.
Chairman, can I just ask
Any
a question?
questions?
How does this differ from, I mean, we've got an internal auditor, and I presume that's ongoing stuff that's happening. How does this differ from what the IA would be providing?
So this, we would, determine an outside financial auditing CPA company to do this audit for many reasons, but, you know, for the most part, we are thinking that someone outside coming and looking in would be ideal. And that's, I think, what happens in most agencies when something like this happens.
It's not a performance audit, it's a financial audit. And the distinction is, help me out.
The distinction is we're looking at the basic financial statements and required supplementary information. We found out that the last time this agency was audited was 2015 by an outside resource. That group was called Green, Finney, and Horton, or Finey and Horton. And we were sent that information after our last Finance and Audit Committee meeting, and we just think because it's been since 2015, and because we just had the CFO leave, we just think bringing in CPA to look financially at our books and make sure that someone outside is looking at that, as opposed to just us. I mean, internal audit, I think wouldn't necessarily, be ideal for this kind of audit. That's what we've asked around. We've talked with other state agencies, and those are the things that, even the governor's office.
Well, I'd heard that the governor's office was suggesting somehow to one of us, and it might have been Stephanie, that would be a good procedure to follow, but I didn't know it was outside. I thought they had recommended somebody, and correct me.
There's two different kinds of audit. There's an administrative audit,
Okay.
Which looks at the processes within an organization.
All right.
And then there's a financial audit, which is done by completely different people. The internal auditor typically is looking at specific things within an agency. This will do a big overview of all the finances of the organization, make sure that everything is in order, and then they'll come back with what they call findings. At that point, we'll review the findings and decide if we need to take a deeper look into anything that is a finding.
Which would be
findings, which we think that there will be no findings. We hope that. That's good. That's what we want. And but I think a separate set of eyes outside of us, they've got plenty on their plates here. And I think if we just have somebody independent look at it, this gives whoever we hire as a director a clean slate. It gives them, they know that everything's good to go, and they feel confident. I think it will give that extra level of confidence to our new executive director.
Pat, you've been around the block a million times. Do you, does that make sense about every 5 years or so?
Doing an independent audit every 5 years is probably a good practice, and we might want to do it a little bit more frequently. It just basically makes sure that the accounting transactions are accounted according to, general accepted government standards, and that there's always room for an extra set of eyes on how we account for things. So I think it's a very healthy thing to do. I think it's kind of a routine thing to do.
It should be.
And they will make management observations as they go through it, and they'll say, hey, consider this, consider that. And so it's a healthy, but it is more of a higher level review than a performance review that internal audit would be involved in. So I think it's healthy, and I don't see a reason why not.
Thank you.
And it's not an accusation.
No.
It's,
good housekeeping for
Good
an
housekeeping.
agency that's
I mean,
$100 million.
Cities, for example, do one every year. Cities and counties do an external audit every year. And that's,
We require our providers to do one every year.
yeah.
It's sort of that.
I think we've become a little, the state does one comprehensive.
That's right.
Of which we participate. They come in, they do some year-end testing so that our data combines with theirs. And sometimes we feel like, well, that's enough. Well, that's not enough. They're testing at a higher level than we should be concerned about. So I think it's a healthy thing to do. and a lot of CPAs can do it, and I think it's.
How do we determine what firm we go with? Do we determine that, or is it,
Procurement, do we have to go through procurement or, yeah.
can we recommend companies to look at us? Or, because I know there's one that does a lot of governmental auditing, it's Malden and Jenkins here in town, and I'd like for us to make sure we get them to bid it, doing that audit if possible. I'd like for them to be included in.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think whenever you want like a routine financial audit, you go through the state auditor's office.
Okay,
And they have
Some.
ways to procure that,
okay,
and they act as the intermediary to make sure that we get a good price. So
Good.
I'm not sure how.
I just want to make sure we get a good firm, a reputable firm to do this for us.
I think we start with them.
Good.
I'm pretty sure they subcontract out. They may do it themselves, or then they subcontract it out. That's their
Yes.
decision.
Last time it was they set us up with that firm. And again, I think I mentioned this before, was that the last time before the 2015 audit had been decades since we had an
Yeah.
audit. So getting in the habit of having one every 5 years just seems, at minimum, seems to be a really good idea.
Okay, great. Well then, do we, Constance, I know you had done a little bit of looking into some things after the last meeting that we had on this topic. Is there anything additional that you want to share that we need to think about?
At the request of Commissioner Manfred, we initially reached out to the governor's office,
Right, okay,
to discuss if they had any suggestions.
right, it's like a month
The governor's
ago.
office suggested that we contact the Department of Administration, which we had already contacted.
Right,
The Department of Administration said we do administrative type,
right,
review, you should contact the state auditor's office. I have contacted the state auditor's office, the director of audit name is Sue Moss. So we're just waiting on the next steps, on what the commission decides. And then the next step would be set up a meeting with her to see how the audit process works.
okay. Thank you for that.
It sounds like we're in a position where we entertain a motion to approve proceeding with a financial audit of the agency at this time.
Mr. Chairman, second.
Thank you. Any further discussion of that? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that's approved, and the staff will take the necessary steps to push that down the road. Okay. Anything further from the Finance and Audit Committee?
That's all that I have to report today.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the update from the Policy Committee. Would recognize Commissioner Bumpers.
Thank you, sir. The first item on our agenda for the Policy Committee is the Freedom of Information Act and the request regarding the that was posted for review and that we had no comments, so we voted on that last month to make that a policy, so that to make that remember that was the emergency policy that we made, and so there's no need to vote on it again because there was no other public comments for that. And then the next item on the agenda was the executive limitations policy. I'm going to let Susan go through these different things that we did for the executive limitations policy, and we're asking for approval of those.
Thank you. Is it okay if I sit here, because I've got to use the computer? If I speak up, are you all right with me sitting here?
Yeah, if we can try to move it, we have a microphone that we can move it all closer to you.
Okay.
Susan, just because we know from past history, you and microphones don't get along all the time.
All right, I'll do my best. We had a little paperwork issue right before the meeting, so I'm working off a computer instead of a paperwork.
That's fine.
The best I can. While she's getting set up, I was on the telephone, I couldn't make it to the last meeting in person, and I know that Commissioner Miller also was on the phone at the same time. There were times when I didn't want to interrupt the meeting, but there were times when I really could not make out what was transpiring. And I don't know if IT could figure out a way possibly to get little microphones like you have at your desk there, to everybody's desk. I don't know what kind of deal that would be to pull that off, but, it sure would help, I think, if somebody can't make the meeting. And if we couldn't hear, then the audience out there that might be listening, that we're so intent on making sure they do hear everything that goes on, they might have trouble also. So could I thank you, I just throw that out as a.
Susan was gonna weigh in on that. There was
So I've done a little research on that with IT because I've seen the struggles in these meetings because we have 3 microphones. And so I think there was some I don't know how much each microphone costs, but I think there was some hesitancy to upgrade or expand the system the months ago when I asked that, because we were converting over to a new system for Microsoft Teams. So certainly, I mean, Mr. Maley is in charge of IT, so I'm sure he'd be glad to follow up on that. But if, at the very least, we can have some improvement in place for next month. But hopefully the new system has more microphones, because we realize it's a big issue. So
just
thanks for bringing it up.
not talking through you, but Commissioner Miller behind you.
He answered it because it's terrible.
So I'll just add, because I was with IT yesterday, they are working on a new system. They've been evaluating and reviewing different capabilities and options. I think they've landed on one. They mentioned that this room is used for lots of different reasons, and they really just had to find something that was going to be suitable for all the use in this particular room. So I just want to share that I think something's coming out soon. They know it's a problem for sure. I know they're working on it.
Well, now we'll be able to get on Teams on our devices that
That'll
we
be a little
have.
easier.
And that will solve some of the problems too, I think.
And it may just make a note for the next agenda that maybe we have somebody from IT come in to give us an update on the communication process to make it as easy as possible.
And also, I'll just add, that, you know, if people in the public that are listening want to provide any input to your experience, please do that, because we won't know if we don't hear from you on your audio experiences and or suggestions or anything, because that should be very, should be a important matter that that we address this situation, because we need for you to hear what we're talking about. We want you to hear what we're talking about, and so hopefully it will get better soon. So.
And Mr. Chairman, if we can hear Mr. Britt, we fine.
Gotcha. So, Susan, thanks for relocating. It probably makes it easier. If you need, if you need to move back and forth, just let us know. I mean, you're not stuck in that chair. So
It is kind of rude, I think, for me to be putting my back to you all as I'm speaking, so I apologize in advance. It always makes me a little uncomfortable, so.
It's the nature of the
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that. That's not my style at all. Okay, so we are addressing 803 CP, which is the executive limitations policy for the commission. And the first edit approved by the policy committee this week is on page 2, which is the beginning of 3A. And it says, an executive summary of all consultant contracts and any other contracts of $200,000 or more recommended by staff within a given fiscal year will be presented to the commission to determine which contracts will be selected for their review. So this clarification was added just to be even clearer about the below content, which talks about some more stipulations about that $200,000 amount. Then the next addition under 3B was added because on following document on your update from policy committee today, we're requesting a directive be marked obsolete. So under 3D, you see an entry that allows for that because it basically took the place of the directive. So present to the commission for approval all federal grant applications as soon as is practical and prior to actual receipt of funds. So again, the committee felt like that was necessary. A new number 8 was added. pursuant to discussion about another directive, which is new and is currently posted for external review, the 41308 DD anti-harassment. So number 8 states, inform the commission quarterly of the number of all DDSN state employee, contracted personnel, and volunteer discrimination and harassment and sexual harassment complaints pursuant to the directive. So that was something that was discussed at the committee meeting a month ago, as well as just this week. And then a new number, let's see, the new number 13, we did a little reordering because of that addition, references to overseeing the internal audit director, and that the state director shall obtain commission consent before hiring or firing, etc. So there were some just discussions about that, if that was appropriate to keep it as is. Based on our research of the code, again, the employee of the commission is the state director. And so in reference to the code, the committee reflected that they felt like that was appropriate to stay as is, despite some prior wishes to kind of switch that around. And then lastly, just for flow of information, because we are in high editing mode with everything we do, 18 and 19 items as they existed were just switched in order, just so that it flowed a little better with the thematic content. So those were the recommended edits from the committee for 803 CP that would need approval.
And the committee voted on this to approve it?
Yes, sir.
So we'll treat that coming out of committee as a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion regarding proposed policy? Hearing none, all in favor of the policy as proposed, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That policy is implemented unanimously. Next would be the follow-up, the 803 CP.
Okay. Commissioner Malthus, would you like me to address this one too?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So pursuant to that change that was just approved regarding, staff informing about federal grants, through this review, it was agreed that 100-0303 federal grant application and change policy could therefore be marked obsolete. So that's being requested for approval.
And that motion to mark as obsolete was approved by the committee?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll treat that again. There's a motion and a second to mark obsolete. Any further discussion with regard to that proposal? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Then that motion is granted. That will be marked obsolete. Next is the federal grant application and change policy.
Okay. And you all right with me continue? You tell me when you want me to stop, okay? 53511 DD is appeal and reconsideration of decisions. This was brought before policy committee in March, put out for external review. We received one set of comments from Disability Rights SC. Staff carefully considered all of those comments, made necessary changes, brought it back to committee, and the committee has approved this version before you today. There were just some consistency issues, making sure that it was clear about calendar days, and also just some clarifications, just to read a little clearer.
That was approved by the committee, so we'll treat that as a motion and a second. Any further discussion regarding the appeal and reconsideration policy? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that policy is approved. Next is the conflict-free case management policy.
Sure, thank you. This is 53517, and so coming out of committee, there's a request for approval of this version in your binders. This directive was reviewed in March by the committee, put out for external review. One comment was received, just taken into consideration. There's a sentence on page 2 was changed to adjust from 30 to 60 days. We also conferred with DHHS because they're the lead on conflict-free case management, and they concurred to switch from 30 to 60 days. So the sentence reads, Any individual who chooses to receive a direct service from his or her case management provider and is newly admitted to that direct service must transition to a new case management provider as soon as possible, but no later than 60 calendar days from admission to the direct service. And that was approved by committee.
So coming out of committee, again, we'll treat that as a motion and a second. Any further discussion with regard to this policy? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, hearing none, that policy is approved unanimously. Next would be the safety precautions for medical and dental treatment.
There was no, for that one, there was no, we went out for public review and there was no comment, so we're recommending that stay as it is now.
And was that was put on by the committee?
By the committee is a motion.
Okay. So again, we'll treat that as a motion and a second to approve that. That's 60303DD. All in favor, please, or any further questions, sorry, or comments?
We've been through that many times and everything's wonderful about that. As wonderful as we can make it, I think.
There you go. All right, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Then that policy is approved unanimously. Next up, 33402DD, short-term use of DDSN regional center property by the public.
Would you like to do this one? So this was presented to the committee at the November 10th, 2020 meeting and was referred to staff for revision. So this has been out for external review. No comments were received. And so that it was recommended from committee for approval.
So just so you all know, there's a lot of discussion about that, regarding insurance and all that sort of thing. But it's all, there's another one that's all as good as we can make it now, I think. Or we think, excuse me. So that a committee is a motion, I think.
Do we get a lot of requests like this?
Not many, from what we understand.
Okay.
Very, right?
It looks like it was almost directed to the old days when we had swimming pools and things like that, and that's.
I think there might have been more broad use. This is kind of Rufus's area,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, there are a few groups that want to utilize our gyms. Usually that's the most popular thing to do things.
Sure. Okay.
Basketball leagues and Coastal Center has a overgrown baseball, softball field that some groups want to use. Usually it's quid pro quo. The groups come out and then perform some help with activities and things for the residents. Good opportunity for the public to interact with those who serve.
Good question. Okay, that was approved by the committee?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll treat that as a motion, a second. Coming out of committee, any further questions or discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so that policy is approved unanimously. Other committee updates.
okay. 2 additional documents were referred from policy committee to finance and audit committee. Thank you so much. Referring to our 2 audit policies, 27504 and 06 DD. Their procedures for implementation of DDSN provider audit policy for boards and for contract service providers. So those will be addressed through finance and audit committee and have also already been started with the review process on the internal side. And then lastly, just for awareness, as I stated earlier, yes, you say it, sorry.
Just for awareness, the harassment thing, the harassment policy is out for 10 days of public review. We have been over and over and over that document, so we hope to have, it'll come back to us again. We will have that for the next meeting. There's been a lot of discussion and a lot of time, effort, and energy spent on that. And we hope that it'll be it's very close to right now, but of course we want to do the 10-day external review, just to let y'all know.
Okay. Any further updates? Do we know what the next committee meeting date's going to be?
I believe
Second Tuesday in
May 11th.
The
I
11th?
think.
Okay. Yeah. Usually at 3.
It's usually a 3, yeah,
Okay.
unless something happens to me or happens to a majority of the committee, that's when it'll be the second Tuesday at 3.
Okay, great. All right. Anything further, Barry?
No, that's it for the policy committee for today.
Okay, thank you. So, moving on to old business, tab 6, the IDRD waiver renewal update. Susan, you are well positioned.
Yes, I'm in the middle of it all. So we're moving to tab 6, and there is a multi-page handout there just referencing the specific details that have gone underway with the waiver renewal. And I just want to make sure I recognize that this has been an intensive project that crosses all areas of DDSN as we work collaboratively to review, address, and revise all of the waiver assurances, looking at all the details. We work with risk management, we work with fiscal, as well as certainly policy. And Lori Manos is on the phone. She is over waiver areas as well as other staff. And then Kyla Schultz is here if you all should have any questions. But I understand my time is short. So I want to make sure that I give you all a lot of time for questions and don't spend all the time talking. But today we are asking for conceptual approval of this update and this direction for the waiver renewal. In executive limitations, it does reference the fact that we should be conferring and sharing information with the commission about waiver-related decisions, services, as well as any discussion with DHHS about rates. So this is definitely done in the spirit of transparency, and you all did vote as a commission for us to work with DHHS on the waiver renewal. So the specific timeline for the renewal activities is in attachment A that I presented to you all in February, but in general, April is when DHHS is coordinating the final draft. In May, they'll take it to their advisory committee, and then the public input required by CMS will begin, that period will begin. And then certainly through the by and by as details are finalized, we'll be working with the provider network to kind of operationalize and make sure any of the changes are really clear. The waiver is not anticipated for renewal until January 1st, 2022. So we're well within the timeline that CMS requires for submission. And as I said, it's been a pretty intensive effort. First, I thought I would just highlight the staff recommendations for waiver renewal, service improvements, additions, removal, and increases. In your handout, we've organized it so that you also have for point of reference the actual current waiver service definition, because sometimes we know we use a lot of service terms, and it's always helpful to look at that. So respite care is the first service, and the improvements with that include a daily rate for group respite in a licensed residential facility, tiered rates for service provision when delivered to multiple participants residing within the same household who need services at the same time. And our note was that the data suggested there were 85 participants who live in multi-participant households. And some of those are 3-person households or 2-person households. So that we felt like that would be beneficial and definitely in response to family and provider input. And then just language in the waiver in general. Again, remember this is about a 300-page document. There are sections about participant-directed services, and so we've updated that language just so it reflects the current process involved with the participant-directed respite. When we talk about that, it's the part that the Respite Coalition helps with that onboarding of the employees.
Susan, I have just one question. On the number 2, the tiered rates for the service provision, that comment or that change, or is that in layman's terms one individual that's certified to provide respite care come into one home where 2 or 3 people are living and provide support to all of those individuals at the same time because they're there and able to do that for more than, as opposed to the current way, which if this is wrong, let me know, but currently each individual has a person assigned to them for respite, and there could be 3 workers in the home one-on-one with the matched one-on-one with 3 individuals. which puts a total of 6 people in one space. And that being a little redundant and not what families really want all the time for their individuals. They'd rather have a little bit less respite one-on-one as opposed to one-on-3 when they all agree that this person can effectively help the house, provide that support, whether they're going together somewhere out in the community or helping with things around the house, cooking, whatever. That's what this means?
I think all of the details you've shared are correct, but yes, it's not very efficient to have individual respite providers when you have multiple waiver participants, that same waiver in the same household. And so it's also hard sometimes to find 3 different respite providers.
Very true.
And so this adds some efficiency to that process. And, for those families that have multiple individuals living in the household, it will be beneficial.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense. Okay. Thank you for that.
Sure. I like the way you said it. The next, in-home support. This is an additional service that also reflects a removal of attendant care. It kind of takes the place of it. As you know, with the Appendix K COVID flexibilities with the waiver, there were some service changes just to allow better service access. So in-home support is currently a community supports waiver service. And so that's just been replicated into the IDRD, intellectual disability related disabilities waiver at the current time. So we would just be putting that in place in the waiver to continue beyond any sort of Appendix K situation. So currently it's there as a replacement for personal care and respite. And so, folks will be individually assessed to make sure in-home support's appropriate. And this service will replace adult attendant care. And whenever a waiver service is removed from a waiver, CMS requires an extensive transition plan to make sure every single individual is transitioned. And so that would take place based on that action to remove adult attendant care. And then C, environmental modifications. This is a request for increase. As you see in the notes, it's sort of unbelievable knowing how cost of living has increased over 20 years, but the environmental modifications lifetime cap for the IDRD waiver has been $7,500 for that long. And so DHHS has been very understanding with the fact that we've got a lot of data that suggests that needs to increase. I mean, just supply costs, let alone everything else. And so we are requesting an increase somewhere around $30,000. And DHHS is still in the process of working through what the impact of that would be, as well as if feasible or if a number like $15,000 or somewhere in the middle would be more reasonable. But we do feel confident that an increase will occur.
Okay, so just in layman's term again.
Yes.
If a client who qualifies for services and has basically, no matter if they're 5 years old at the time they qualify or 30 years old when they qualify for services or enter the system, they only get $7,500 for their lifetime.
In this waiver currently, yes.
To make any modification to their home that they may need, whether it's a wheelchair ramp or a bed or something that's alarm system because they have elopement, things that happen in the home. They only get $7,500 to cover that.
Yeah, we usually think of environmental modifications like bathrooms, or widening hallways or doorways or ramps.
Right.
And so families have had to choose either to outlay their own money when $7,500 is all they can use for the extra, or they've had to decide they can't get something done that they need to get done, or they have to pick and choose. Do we need a ramp more than a bathroom? And so it's really not been ideal, and that's why we, as DDSN, we have a great communication relationship with DHHS, but we've kind of been sharing the lessons learned, and we're really encouraging the larger increase in the amount for. Yeah. So there are minimum, standards of daily living that we think are really important, especially in these really difficult housing situations. So a bathroom modification tends to be about $15,000 itself. So that's why $15,000 isn't a great threshold to stop at, just for information. Okay, thank you for that. Additionally, during the waiver renewal process, there were several considerations for waiver services I talked about in February that are suspended now, but we'd like to revisit those with the waiver amendment that will occur sometime in the future. I think there was some suggestion in some written material that that would definitely occur in fiscal year 22. I just want to go on the record and say we do not have a date yet for a waiver amendment, but with the waiver amendment for this waiver, we would like to consider these services in section 2 that I've spoken about before. We've spoken about the need for multiple residential rates because we have multiple residential models and are currently paid one by DHHS, one rate. We also feel like to intensify the skills and progress with employment, that career preparation needs to be intensified, and to do that it would require a lower staffing ratio, which would also require a different rate. Also, we were developing an independent living skills service to replace the adult companion service, which is problematic, and still have some work to do on that as far as staffing and education, training, and how that matches up with rates. But that would allow then that removal of adult companion because it's a replacement service that's skill-based, so people can be more independent in their natural settings. And then in response to employment needs, we've determined that some folks in employment situations still struggle temporarily, at least, with individual transportation needs. And so we're looking forward to enhancing the waiver to address that. And then, of course, the commission voted for us to work with DHHS to consider the animal-assisted or hippotherapy, which is horse-related therapy.
I couldn't hear you. What was that?
Oh, the animal-assisted therapy, the hippotherapy.
Okay.
It's really technically called hippotherapy, but there's also a service called animal-assisted, which could be animals, not horses, just in general. So we've done the research on that. DHHS is, hoping to continue discussing that. And then, of course, it's definitely not the least, being in the last position on this, but electronic monitoring, which would kind of go along as a monthly service fee that folks incur so that they can use some of these monitored assistive technology devices. That's currently not included in any of the waiver service definitions discretely or embedded within another area. So that needs to be addressed in the future too, we recommend. Any questions about those? And just keeping in mind, DDSN and DHHS are definitely mindful that as additions occur to a waiver through an amendment or a renewal, that there are resulting cost increases. So those all have to be considered, and also making sure that the rates are right so that providers want to provide the service. And then lastly, in your section here, as well as in attachment B, we've addressed the performance measures. So CMS has these assurances that are required to make sure that states are using waiver services, waiver funding appropriately. And so they have these items called performance measures. It's really the data and how it's going to be collected and analyzed to report to make sure that those assurances are met. So we've worked diligently with DHHS and our new additions technical assistance contractor to make sure we're not only compliant with what CMS requests, but that we've got good data sources and that we can kind of estimate how we'll do on the data points to kind of forecast. So those items have all been revised. With one exception, we're still working on the fiscal area, which is Appendix I, so you'll not see those on the chart. Those are coming. We've had some meetings in the last couple of weeks on those and just have a few questions with our technical assistance folks. We're waiting to resolve those. And we've also developed in the waiver language a more proactive and collaborative approach on looking at the data, either quarterly or annually, that's yielded by the various performance measures so that we can see where we're headed. We're not waiting too late to make changes if necessary, and we're just being more proactive and thorough. So that will be a joint, we have a lot of other data points that we collect in the performance measures, obviously through contract compliance reviews and licensing reviews, et cetera. But these performance measures are very specific to what CMS requires. And so those will be what we specifically address with DHHS through these risk management meetings.
So these performance measures that we're talking about here, these are on the compliance basis. as opposed to effectiveness. I mean, that's sort of been an ongoing issue as far as, does compliance really tell us that we're getting good quality services out there?
So they're developed by CMS to make sure that states are compliant with their requirements, but I would say that they're enmeshed with quality, so they're not separate. So,
Yeah,
like.
It's just a question of how good a measure of quality are they?
Right.
I agree with you that they do influence that.
Mm-hmm.
But what we want is good waypoints, good.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so that's part of the development that I think needs to be happening.
Sure, and so we've gone through these with our technical assistance contractors, and we've asked critical thinking questions like, what is the assurance, what is the sub-assurance, which is kind of just under that, and our current measures good measures, good assurances, or not? And when they're not, we've rewritten them. And so we've got a lot of checks and balances on those, but I don't want to confuse these performance measures with what we do through our quality assurance, our risk management at the agency level. And that's one of those theoretical discussions we've had, that there's so much more that we monitor, measure, and manage and respond to beyond these performance measures. But these performance measures are what we must do for CMS. So in some cases, when it's been a real topical issue that requires more focus and attention, we've added more measures. And in other areas where there were kind of superfluous kinds of items added in there, we've kind of sheared them back.
Yeah, I mean, I understand we don't necessarily want to make these stand.
Right.
This is the floor, and we don't
Yeah.
necessarily need to make it, but I also don't want the assumption that because we're meeting the floor that we're doing a good job.
Right. Yeah, I would not measure only our performance on performance measures as saying that the waiver services or that the state's doing a good job.
Chairman,
That's
may-
why
Yeah.
all these other pieces.
It's okay if I follow? Well, the chairman asked exactly, I think what we've been thinking about for some time, talking about every now and then. How do we know, that extra level, how do we quantify, how does staff quantify that, to take us out of just the basic, yes, we're doing all these things correctly, CMS is not mad at us, we're not being penalized, but we're even going beyond it. How do we quantify that?
So there's a different management level, and I'm gonna look at Kyla and see if she can say it in a better way than I'm saying it, but sometimes we're on the same wavelength. There's a difference between the performance measures, again, which are data points that must be explained and you must be held accountable for them to the feds. And there's a difference between the day-to-day management to assure that the state's waiver services are provided with quality and with sensitivity and with responsiveness. And so those measures are kind of how we do the contract compliance reviews. There's specific indicators which are measured. And so there's a comprehensive review also going on in that area to kind of look at what's valid, is the data being used? Is it the right data? And are we looking at things the way that we need to? So we feel confident.
Is there a circular here where providers and families and everybody are giving us feedback on that? I mean, how do we quantify superior action above the compliance level? I guess is there a document you're preparing that?
So risk management is not actually in my area currently, but it is so interwoven with anything waiver that we have day-to-day.
I can add a little bit. So when you look at the waiver as a totality, a document, each appendix describes a lot of things that we do. And at the end of it, we say, hey, we do all these things, but we only are going to measure for, to send you the data for certain specific items. But we measure hundreds of things, right? And so when you look at some of the sections, it describes like, we're out doing this, we're on site, we're doing personal interviews, we're talking to, individuals and families and getting their, feedback about things. So we talk about all that. CMS does not require, nor do they really want 700 performance measures, right? They've narrowed it down by assurances and sub-assurances. So what we do is we meet as a group and we say, what best of all the things that we do will tell CMS that we're doing, we're assuring this high-level subject. And they are very high level. You can decide almost anything you want as long as it seems reasonable. You have a good data source and you're going to meet on it. a regular basis in sort of do some analytics.
I think his question though pertains more to what are we doing through the indicators and the contract compliance reviews, the day-to-day management to make sure that that's exceeding just a, and, you know, kind of focusing on that review that you're doing to kind of revamp that to make sure that,
I mean,
and I would say just before you say that, providers have a constant feedback loop about those reviews, about the reports, about action plans, about feedback. We know, I think we as the greater we know what providers don't like, what they do like, what they perform well in, what they don't, what we think are good measures, what need to be discarded and revised. So that's sort of a separate process from the waiver renewal. But that's going on right now. I don't know if you want to say a paragraph
yeah, I
about
mean,
that.
right now, you know, we're looking at that process and how we can get measures that point more towards quality, because it's very difficult to measure, to your point, Gary, about compliance. Compliance is a checkbox, that's easy, right? So when we're talking about the quality component, we're trying to get some measures that show that a little bit more, but also we're realizing that that takes human beings to go out, to sit in a provider, have a discussion with them, go through the results of their compliance review, and then talk to them about how they can even be better. Because just because you're compliant doesn't actually necessarily always mean it's good quality. So I'm a believer in, okay, you got the minimum, you know, that's great. How can we make this better? So you're doing this activity, but here's some tips and things that you could make, you know, your documentation better, or, you know, how can you engage the individuals and the families more in these processes? So we're looking at that, but that's very time consuming, and that involves a lot of human beings. So we're trying to, you know, up our skill set on that and have the availability to follow through with that, because there's a lot of providers and a lot of, you know, individuals, and getting out there is.
You know, Kyle, if I were a chairman, one last call, if I were a provider, I'm just being cynical now for a minute, but if you came to me and said, okay, we're going through the checklist and check, that's great, you got everything done, I would say, good, you want a cup of coffee while you leave? You know, just shush, shush, shush. And if somebody tried to say, well, we won't even, well, wait a minute, I passed the test. I mean, I got at least an 85. So why are you bugging me? Don't bug me anymore. I mean, is that not, what incentive does such a provider have to go the extra mile and not think to herself or himself, hey, y'all just stop being bureaucrats. Leave me alone and let me do my job. At what point do the two intersect, I guess?
So every provider, I'll start, you finish. Every provider contract indicates that all standards and directives will be followed. The contract compliance reviews take a section of those and say, these are the ones we're measuring. You're still responsible for all of those. So really, all of that is fair territory. It's just the measurement is done on these specific ones in the reviews.
So you ever have these groups kind of get together in sort of a forum situation where, well, now it couldn't be a forum, but it'd have to be an online forum to either applaud or criticize an overreaching on the part of the department. I like the idea of pushing the envelope a little bit, but at the same time, they're the business people out there, and so I'm sort of split, wondering, and I don't hear from them, so I don't get phone calls that say we're complaining, or whatever.
So we have standing work groups, and tell me to be quiet if you want me to, but we have standing work groups called case management work group, and so a variety of disciplines attend those, but it's focused on case management related issues. We get feedback, we develop tools in those. I was gonna say something. There's also quality management. I can't say that providers, anybody who really gets reviewed loves the review process, because it's a lot of data. It is sort of labor intensive, and it's scrutinizing your work, and it's, you know, there are some things that are not so discreetly measured. There's a little bit of judgment, so there's always room for appeal. There's always room for discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need to really be treating everything we do as a partnership with providers. And so sitting down and having those conversations, while they may not want us to do that, I think that's appropriate given our mission, vision, and values, that we sit and say, okay, this is, you know, the minimum, this is great, but you always should be looking to do more. And again, quality is subtle sometimes. You can have someone's, residential support plan and have all the required elements, but could you describe things a little bit better, or could you be a little more creative in thinking? And the answer is usually yes. And I like to have those conversations because I think our system will just stay the same and we won't ever move forward if we're not having conversations with providers. I think that is essential. Providing human services is having human beings talk to each other and work through this stuff and get feedback from providers when something doesn't make sense. Because sometimes you read something and then you're like, okay, this is the requirement, but how does it apply in the real world? I don't quite understand. So I'm going to help walk them through, like, how do you operationalize, having a human rights committee? How do we do that? Let's talk about that. And how do we get active involvement from individuals and families and stakeholders? Those are conversations that we have to have because a directive or a standard isn't going to necessarily get them there.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
I just want to add one thing. On the performance measures, you see a data source called a case management monitoring tool. So that's a new tool that we're developing to address specifically in phase 1, just these performance measures, that we needed a better data source than what we used before. I think I said dicing and splicing data to come at what we need to. So that approach is over, and this is the new world of making sure we have good, clean data sources. And so the case management monitoring tool is reflected in some of the Appendix D items about participant-centered planning, and also in Appendix G regarding receiving information about abuse and neglect, and making sure individuals' healthcare needs are met. So I just wanted to make sure you all see that. We are going to be introducing kind of those items and the phrasing in them to the case management work group this month, and which is the provider DDSN work group. DHHS also listens to those and is a key member. And then we'll have to program a tool into FairUp, our online health record system, or electronic health record system. And then that'll be something that'll be easy kind of in those regular case management visits to make sure that the data is collected cleanly and accurately. So there'll be training involved for providers with that. That concludes the data I have for you today.
Let me just say one thing about what she was saying, since it's my baby in this regard. It's true that there are other animal-assisted therapies that we can use, but I do want everybody out there to know that horses are the experts in that regard and more proven to be effective in that regard. So keep that in mind, and that's the primary way that's used.
I think it's always good with a new service to start out a little narrow than to go real big. So I think, the horse direction is a wise recommendation as well. We have done research and there are other services and waivers that are animal assisted, but I concur based on my little bit of knowledge about the therapy itself.
Yeah, there's a lot more proven in that regard.
Sure.
But I'm certain there's other animals, but they would have to take a backseat to my equine.
We know.
Just so you know.
I know.
Moving on.
So staff is requesting approval of the proposed performance measure changes.
The conceptual approval that this is the direction for the waiver service changes, for our approach to the services and the amendment that will be at some point in the future with DHHS, short future. I hate to put a date on it because I don't have there. And then also those performance measures as we presented that fix problems we identified in the past reports.
Okay. Would entertain a motion to approve those as presented.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just put that the best you can in minutes.
I'll write it for you.
Yeah.
I'll write it for.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I would ask.
Thank you.
All right. Anything further discussion-wise with regard to this? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is approved. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the legislative update. Cloud. We're on tab 7 now.
In the interest of time, I won't go through every single piece of legislation because the majority of them haven't had updates. So I'll skip down to the bottom of page 1, and that's S-264, the Disabled Self-Employment Development Trust Fund. I received notification from Medical Affairs yesterday that they want to have a subcommittee hearing to get input on the bill. It would be my recommendation to the subcommittee that they make an amendment to make it more similar to H 3513, the sister bill in the House, because the Senate version names DDSN as the administrator of this program, and it's probably best put under VOCA rehab simply because I believe the intent of the bill is to serve people with all disabilities and not just those that we serve here at DDSN. So it's my recommendation that we offer that amendment to the committee.
I'll deal with that one, and we can deal with that one at a time. So staff is asking for a motion to recommend to the subcommittee that H351, or I'm sorry, not H, Senate 264 be conformed with the House version to name VOC Rehab as the oversight agency. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion with regard to this recommendation? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That's approved. Christie, is that clear? Did you get on that? Okay.
Okay, the next update, of course, the biggest bill of this session has been subminimum wage 533. It's moved on to the House for their consideration. It will go through the same process, through committee, just like it did in the Senate. So we'll be continuing to monitor that.
It does have amendments that are quite notable and quite positive.
Yes, sir. 2 amendments were put forth. Both of them regard powers given to DDSN. So the state director would have the ability to appoint the 2 members in the provider network that will serve on the task force and 2 members that are either currently or formerly employed under 14C certificates. So that is a very good positive for the agency. And also there will be a report that will be due to the governor's office made by DDSN, and of course, Rob and Rufus have already started gathering that data that will be included in that report. And if you want to discuss the report or anything else like that offline, then we can certainly do that. I just don't want to hold y'all up. And then S-177, that was when I emailed out. There was an amendment offered and adopted to allow employees who are treating or caring solely for vulnerable populations. They may be required by their employer to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. So it doesn't say that you have to get it or employers have to tell you to get it. But if an employer chooses that option, then that is allowed with that amendment. And then, of course,
How does that affect us directly as far as the number of people in the centers and regional centers and things of that nature?
Well, if there are individuals in the regional centers who are choosing not to be vaccinated, then who are employees at the regional center, then they can be directed by DDSN to receive the vaccination.
Right, so they can be forced to do it basically if this passes.
Well, the bill itself wouldn't force people to get vaccinated. It would allow employers the option to make that mandatory for their employees, for those who work directly with vulnerable populations.
So our regional director could make that a requirement if they wanted to.
Yes, but I think that would probably need to be approved by Rufus and then by Pat, Constance, and then probably the full commission if that's a policy that the agency wants to adopt.
Oh, so we'd have to adopt a policy after this is passed?
Yes, because you're given the choice. The employer's given the choice.
Okay, that's fine.
It's an option, is what it comes down to. It says if we want to make that a policy, we can make that a condition of employment.
Okay, so
we don't have to.
And S-743, that's the latest bill.
that has to do with the composition and governance of DDSN. This bill, it was introduced very late. I don't believe that there will be any movement this session. This will be something that we'll need to pay close attention to come January of next year.
Now, they had a subcommittee meeting, right?
No, sir, not that I'm aware. It was referred to, it's in medical affairs.
Yeah.
So what was the
There a
43?
subcommittee meeting you're aware of?
No, sir, not that I'm aware of.
What was the 43-0 vote? What was that taken in? I just remember seeing that part of
That
that,
was for
the email that you sent.
533. That was for S 533.
Okay,
Yeah.
not for this one. Okay, gotcha.
No.
That was with
Okay.
the amendments of
So-
S 533.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, this one was just introduced this month.
Right.
So,
Okay, I thought I saw something
mhm.
that, Commissioner Thomas is asking about, but I think I was confused, so that's why you're confused, Commissioner Thomas. So it didn't go to subcommittee, and I thought
So
it
that
did.
hasn't moved yet, what you're saying?
No, it hasn't
It's not
moved.
it didn't make crossover.
Yeah, there's not going to be any movement on it this
Just a
session.
Well, I suspect that you understand that we would want to, that we want you to look daily to see if that's moving right.
Yes.
Right.
Okay,
Well,
so,
well,
And you don't have to worry about it anymore because it didn't make crossover.
Well, we don't know yet, they're not out of session.
It did.
Well, there's a
crossover.
deadline. There's a
Deadline.
deadline.
It had crossover already
Yeah, crossover was last week.
last week.
So if it doesn't, it's not going to, is that what it's?
it wouldn't
This
until
session.
next year.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Unless they put it on some kind of special designation
Right.
and identify it as special designation. What I feel like I would like for you to do is really keep your eye on these subcommittees.
Mhm.
Because we need to know when the subcommittees are meeting. And I think maybe you would know, but you might think, well, I'll be there. But we need to know. So if you will email us and say, and sometimes I'm just my emails and you don't hear about a subcommittee meeting until almost the day before. It's supposed to be 24-hour notice, I believe, but they're posted. And I'm presuming on the website somewhere, you're gonna find a posting of a subcommittee on the bill. That's when somebody needs to get on the phone to us and say, do y'all wanna be present, to be able to speak? Because you might not feel like you can speak for the commission or for staff, I mean, for leadership and the staff. And I think, you know, I think on 533, we needed to be at subcommittee, because when I called the chairman of the committee and said, look, we're gonna have an impact, possibly up to 600 folks could be impacted, he sort of said, well, why wasn't this brought up in subcommittee? So, well, we didn't have time to get the information together, so that would have been at least something that could be presented to subcommittee. But the Senate and House both, I mean, they want you to work out the details in subcommittee and don't want to be blindsided in full committee by something that's a problem. But to avoid that, for instance, on, what's the number on the,
743.
743, I mean, there are a number of items that maybe, a subcommittee needs to know to, if they're going to do cabinet, for instance, if they're going to do cabinet, there are a plethora of things that come through DDSN that as a state senator, I had no idea of how intricate and far-reaching the program was. Well, we are on live, and even the subcommittee meetings are on live. So if this goes to cabinet, how will the public be able to be integrated? For instance, the cabinet carries a lot of positives to it, but it's also, it has a tendency to make the agency insular, and you can't quite get through. Who do you get to if you want to complain? Just try. I mean, it will end up rebounding to the legislature. They'll end up getting a lot more phone calls if it's a cabinet agency, but then they will say, well, that's really the governor, and then it's just passing the buck. And so these are the kinds of things that the legislators need to really think about. There are ways around it, maybe to have expanded liaisons or something. I don't know. I've tried to figure this out, because one thing in the year and a half I've been on the commission is how many folks are impressed by the decisions that are made. And that's why I really like the transparency and things going up online as soon as possible. Will that happen? How do you get transparency for the decision-making process? there won't be meetings like our commission meetings.
Right.
It'll be gone. So when the decisions for directives, for instance, hundreds of directives, we don't work by so much regulations as by directives that change with the fluid situation with the federal government and CMS activity and all that. And you know, how's the public brought in? And this is a concern that I've got. And if they're going to do cabinet, how do you keep it from becoming insular and where there's no representation that a family who's having problems can go to and make a phone call to a commissioner and at least get some traction?
There's a multitude of things that need to be discussed regarding this situation. We just need to be
Like with any
acutely
bill.
aware of
Like
what
with
goes
any
on
bill.
with this.
Like what?
Like with any bill, there's all
Like-
sides to all sorts of
Yeah.
things that
Mr.
people.
Chairman, I'd like to see us, you know, as I look down at who the sponsors are on this bill, you know, these are members of our Senate who serve on our advisory subcommittees. You know, I would like to see us take the time to go meet with those senators and have conversations with them one-on-one as commissioners to explain these things to them. I think I think there's not a clear understanding with them as to decisions that we have made in the last 6 months. I don't think they understand the processes we're going through I mean, I know after watching the most recent, where they were going through the committee meeting to question our new commissioner that will be coming on with us, they had questions about things that he would have no way to know. It was things like, how are you going to handle the hiring of a new executive director? He wouldn't know that. That's a personnel issue that we deal with in executive session. These are things he wouldn't know, but the senators don't understand that those are personnel issues that have to be handled in executive session because they are personnel issues. And I think they don't, especially these that are listed, don't have a clear understanding of how that process works. So I would like to see us make a trip to the Hill, and visit with these senators either at the end, before the end of this session or the beginning of next session. And I think it needs to be us as commissioners that make this trip, not, I don't think we need to send our representative necessarily to have those conversations for us.
So basically, what you're saying is that we give the legislators good knowledge,
That's correct.
then they can make good decisions on behalf of those that we represent in DDSN.
Exactly, Commissioner Miller.
I agree with that.
I mean, I certainly think we can request to have the meeting. It's a question about whether they'll take it or not.
Sure, certainly.
We should all, ideally, we would all come and meet individually with different ones on the same day and switch around and go around, and basically we would inundate the Hill.
I'm not opposed to the cabinet. 2008, my wife showed me some article that quoted me. I was, believe it or not, way back then involved in the intricacies of some of the things going on, and talked about how it might be the thing to do to take this to the cabinet level. After having served a year and a half, I don't take that back, but I would say, hey, with some caveats, how are you going to cover this? Maybe the government don't really want this when you really get down to what this is all about, because the intricacies are far-reaching, and maybe that's why it needs to be under a cabinet, and maybe I could be talked out of the concerns I've got, but I think they at least need to know what the problems are going to be if it goes to cabinet, and I think you can probably list them on one hand. It's probably going to be 4 or 5 major issues that maybe they could take care of in the legislation. So, but anyway, getting back to, I mean, don't assume, please, and I know you don't, but don't assume we're not interested in subcommittee level stuff. I mean, as subcommittee, as rep over there, you're paid rep and everything. You know, they've got a representative, and if you don't have anything to say at a subcommittee, they're going to assume the department is neutral on the subject matter. Well, the leadership might be, but the commissioners might have some issues. So if we're showing up, even if we're not speaking on behalf of, because things can happen quickly, even if we're not speaking on behalf of the group, at least somebody can say something that raises a red flag to put them on notice. And notice is a big deal. It really is, so that they've been attuned to some problems that might be there. Well, why don't you go back? Thank you very much, Commissioner Miller. Why don't you go back and see if you can get the commission and get staff to get us some more information, and we'll hold off on the decision subcommittee until the next subcommittee meets. It's sort of, that's what I'm talking about. And I think if you will tell us when these subcommittee meetings are coming, we can individually decide to go if we want to. Maybe the chairman or maybe Constance might say, this is something maybe y'all should, one or two of you should show up for, to be integrated on the front end, and that's the subcommittee, that's at the place of the subcommittee. So
Certainly.
there you go. And if I think everybody would be sort of on, in other words, we've got to be brought on early in the process. So we're not seeing later on is coming as, why weren't you here 3 months ago?
And to say that we're intricately concerned about 743 would be an understatement.
An understatement.
That is an understatement.
You also have added in the executive branch of government, so we give them knowledge that maybe they're not aware of.
Yep.
Knowledge,
Knowledge.
so they can make good decisions
Yeah.
on behalf of the constituents.
I think we have two different threads here. We have Commissioner Thomas's concerns to make sure that we are getting good information in a timely fashion at all levels, particularly the subcommittee level. And I think we had Commissioner Rollinson's thread, which was specifically directed towards trying to address 743.
Correct.
And so, Commissioner Thomas, I think your thread, I think that was the final statement on that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Good, okay.
Yes, sir.
So then moving on to Commissioner Rollinson. Commissioner Rollinson, did you want to make a motion of any sort with regard to that, or?
I would like for us to try to set up appointments. I mean, I think that is, should that be a motion to?
I think it would be appropriate for us, I mean, I think it would, a motion basically to direct staff to try to,
Okay.
to reach out
To
to
each
the,
one of these individually and set up a meeting where at least two of the commissioners, if not three, it's four, we have to call a meeting, correct?
correct.
Okay, so at least, maximum of three commissioners would be able to attend a meeting with each of these individual senators, Alexander, Shealy, Peeler, Hutto, Verdon, Massey, and Scott. And Shane Martin had a lot of questions for our last, our new commissioner that's coming on, whenever he gets final approval from the Senate. And I think he also needs to be included in that. And I'd like for us to each sit down with those senators and make sure they understand everything that's been going on and provide them a clear understanding of the direction we intend to take this commission and this agency.
Okay.
Okay?
So that would be the motion for staff to reach out to try to arrange meetings, see if the senators will take those meetings.
So moved.
Second.
I'm gonna actually give it to, with due deference to
I'll
Commissioner
move.
Miller. I think Commissioner Rollinson moved, I'll recognize Commissioner Miller as a second.
Okay. That's
Any
fine.
further discussion with regard to that?
Let me just say that we want an update on that particular motion next meeting,
Sure, yeah.
that particular motion. And 743.
Yeah.
But that motion particularly.
Any further discussion?
Good report, Kim, very good. And if next time we could put down when the next meetings are, when they're gonna be doing their schedule, that would be really helpful to add that as a line under each one of those
Okay.
things, okay? Thanks, Kim.
And,
Sorry.
Yep.
When's the session over?
May 13th.
Okay, May 13th. Okay. Thank
So those meetings may need to occur after session's over because they may need
That's
some
fine.
time.
That's fine. I mean, and like I said, we're
Yeah,
not,
I just
We're fine
was
with
curious.
that.
I just wanna make sure they understand what we're doing.
Okay.
And we would like to know when they would want us to come. If they want us to come in 3 or 4 months, that's fine too. Or 6 months or January,
we're
whatever.
not demanding, we're asking.
Okay.
Let them set the date.
We would
That's
love
right, let them
them
set the
to-
dates and tell us what we want to do.
That's
We're
right.
fine.
All we can do is ask for it.
That's right.
Right.
And my last update of.
Hang on, we got a
Sorry.
motion pending, that we have to
Oh, yeah,
vote it
that's
on. So any further discussion of that motion at this time? Okay, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Yes, that motion carries. Now, last part of your update.
So we will be having a new commissioner soon. Dr. Coer, he's very nice. I think he'll be a great addition to the group. Just as soon as we get him through the full Senate, he'll be joining us. So pending any question, that concludes my report.
I think that'll be the first time since in a long time we'll have 7. We're talking a long time we'll have 7.
Yeah, a long time we've had 7, okay,
Thank you, Kim.
Might I say, if we're in the same room, where would he sit?
They might, I can bump up to that table and so you can have a seat.
Okay.
I've avoided sitting at that table because I don't like being,
Yeah, you won't have to,
I don't-
you won't have to move to that table. Okay,
if need be. All right, we'll figure it out. So next item, moving on to new business. First item, tab 8, the administrative services contract fact.
Okay. Administrative service contract has been an issue it's been a goal between Department of Health and Human Services and DDSN since approximately 2013. The genesis of this contract was to stop DDSN's split rate approach to generating administrative costs and allow providers to direct bill for services. And before providers could direct bill and go to a more fee-for-service model, we had to get out of the split rates, and the way we would recover our administrative costs would be through a contract with HHS. We are on the 1-yard line, and we're almost ready to score.
So which way?
Hey, wait a second. The good side. We have the final draft. I'm reviewing and Constance is reviewing it, and she is asking for HHS to do one last legal review, so she's not ready to sign it yet, but we're very close. But it is such an important document because it creates the condition for us to go to fee-for-service, because we will pass through rates. In anticipation of this contract, we pass through all at-home rates to providers on January 1st. And that's a big step toward fee-for-service.
January 1st, 2021?
2021,
Okay.
yes. And we did it retroactive to July 1st of 20. Now, what that does is, once we pass through the rates, now we can have the contract, and we will get our administrative fees paid from July 1st, 20 for the entire fiscal year. And the contract just sets out roles and responsibilities for what we do for HHS to administrative waivers, administrative ICF community, and it's your basic roles and responsibility contract. But what this contract will let us do that we've not been able to do for many, many years is take the overhead costs of central office and actually get them matched at 50%. Because we had so much excess cost in the system, we're not able to match it. And this immediately allows us to take approximately $20 million of excess cost in the system and monetize it into reimbursable at 50%, which I estimate about $8 to $8.2 million this year. And so that'll be money that we have not had before, and I think that's very positive for the agency. It's a 5-year contract. I'll just give you an overview. I think we're not going to be asking for a vote today. I think we still have to do a legal review. That's probably next month.
But, DHHS is legal is looking at it as we speak. They tried to fast track it, the individual attorney that needed to look at it, when we met with them on Monday without sick leave. They're meeting this morning in regards to it, so I should have an update in regards to the contract by next week, early next week.
Are we expecting any major changes?
No, we're not, but they requested that they be able to have their legal go through it one more
I
time.
gotcha.
We're not
Okay.
anticipating any major changes.
Okay, so that's not from our side, that's from their
That's
side.
their side.
Well, Constance, I have a few questions. I've talked to staff about this just to kind of, because I want to know how it's going to impact our staff and the people out here. Obviously, there are some questions that were brought to executive staff from employees here. And I know that specifically they were referring to page 5. If you'll look on page 5, there were questions on number 7 under, let's see, page 5, it's page 5 of the document, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, there were questions on those. And then under number 24, there were questions on C, D, E, and F. And then question number 30, 32, 33, and 34, there were questions. And as I review the questions they had, they are legitimate questions. And they're questions that I would like clarified as a commissioner, because they get a little bit more specific about what our responsibilities are. I think that's part of the problem that we've experienced as an agency in the past, is just being a little too vague and saying, oh, it'll get done, it'll get done, it'll get done, and it not ever quite getting done, or not knowing who and what our limitations are. You know, I think I've written those questions down here, and I don't intend to go through them individually. What I want to do is give these to you all, and when we bring these back to review, I'd like for these issues to be clarified in the contract so that we have a good clarification of those issues, to make sure that we cover ourselves on specifically on those issues.
I will just say, we talked like this, and, so this contract has been going back and forth between DDSN and DHHS when I was over at DHHS.
Sure.
So we talked at length about a magnitude of issues. We
Sure.
met with DHHS on Monday, had my entire executive staff team there. We brought up some additional concerns that we had.
Okay, good.
But the consensus was, at this point, we need to get the contract executed. And then if we need those changes, we can do an amendment, because
Okay.
those changes are, with this contract, it's 5 years.
I understand. And I don't have a problem with that. I just want to make sure we're covering our bases. And, you know, and these aren't huge things that we're asking here.
And keep in mind, though, we can ask for the changes, but DHHS is in control of the contract.
Well, and a lot of them are just tell us what we're responsible for.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, it's not, it's nothing extensive. It's, you know, basically, add the word DDSN contracted providers. I mean, it's, you know, it's what type of, adverse decisions are they referring to? I mean, you know, we just aren't getting, we're just saying adverse decisions. Well, who decides what are adverse? I mean, you know, so those are just clarifications. It's kind of like our policies. Nothing's wrong with them. We just need to have it clarified a little bit more detail.
We'll probably vet all of those.
I'll give them to you. I've written them down for you.
Okay.
Okay. That was all I had.
So,
So we're putting this off until next month, but we expect
yeah, it feels,
update next
feels-
Yeah, that'd be
right,
great.
it feels like at this point in time, we'll hold off on the vote. Okay. With the understanding that Stephanie will pass that on, and then Constance, you can follow up on that, or Pat, you can follow up on that with us where we stand, and whether we can get DHHS.
They may not.
Yeah, I mean, that's, and again, it may be where this and put it in for the amendment, might be,
That's right.
yeah, another option.
Just to be transparent, I got the impression at the meeting on Monday that they're not interested in any more changes.
Sure, that's pretty typical of HHS. Once they've reached their stopping point with document, that's it, and anything you want, they're gonna wanna go through an amendment process. I mean, we've dealt with that before.
September of last year that we were ready to sign the contract.
Yeah.
So the now more changes at this point.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of changes here in the last year.
There have been.
It was, you know,
Well, no, I mean, the same staff that would have reviewed it back in September of last year, staff that reviewed it this go around.
okay.
But what I'm hearing is that the door still will be open to present amendments that they can look at, that,
Well, yeah, and they have a new director over there as well.
Except for
The door is open, but what I'm being transparent about is on Monday, most of their executive staff was there, including the interim director. Of course, they're gonna have a new director in here.
Robert Kerr, yeah, Mr. Kerr.
And they weren't open, they didn't want any more changes.
no, I understand that part. I'm just saying, after the contract has been sealed, then we need to look at those.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, sorry, go ahead, Rob.
I was just saying, so if there was wording in the contract that says that we need to monitor something, we don't have anything in place to do that monitoring, we're just gonna make that happen?
We're not gonna attempt to make it happen, we're not gonna just make it happen. But, I mean, these are changes that we already suggested to them, and proposed.
Sounds like that's what they want to do.
They were, I mean, so, Whatever change, whatever suggestions we would like to make it whole, we will make those suggestions and change it to it. They control.
So they drafted the original document, and we just keep looking at it and seeing where we.
Okay, my question
No,
is.
we drafted the document, we approved the document, we gave it to them for their final review, and then they accepted it.
DDSN didn't draft this version. This version
Yeah,
came from
but-
DHHS drafted, and the past version was just like this, and the future version was supposed to be edited, but DDSN, because our staff originated from this contract, we did not write this one.
But the contract that we sent over, they added 5 legal boilerplate changes, 3 word changes, and 3 financial sentence changes. So that's the difference between what we approved and what is in the final contract. And if we want to reopen it, and we're glad to resolve your issues.
And maybe you can resolve them without putting it in this. Maybe there can be, like you said, an amendment that we can look at that shows the answers to those questions I have. I just want to make sure that we are listening to our staff and we are actually taking their years of working in this agency's knowledge and base, and making sure we're making solid decisions based on what they're giving us, not just ignoring the stuff that they're giving us.
The real question is, do we need to vote on this next month to be approved and then amend it? Or do we need to vote on it now to be approved and then work on the amendments? That's the big question.
My understanding is they're gonna sign a contract, am I correct?
Not without us voting on it, they can't.
We were just bringing it to you for information purposes, to let you know where the state, I don't think we're at the stage for voting, because DHS hasn't sent us, that legal hasn't sent us the final copy.
See, that's why I'm saying, if it's not the final copy, then they can make these few changes. It's not, we're not asking for a new document. These are few.
Well, let me make a motion that we just get an update next month.
Yeah, I don't think we need,
Decide whether we want to vote then or not.
I mean, I don't necessarily know we need a motion at this point in time. I mean, if.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we want to make sure it comes up next month.
Right, I mean, we can put it on the agenda for next month.
Right.
And I think the bottom line, Stephanie, becomes like any contract, at some point in time, one side may say, nope, we're not gonna entertain any changes. And then we have to decide whether we wanna go forward on the contract or not. And that's, and dealing with the HHS, sometimes they just go, nope, we're done talking. I mean,
Well, they have a new director over there, and I think he's very anxious to make sure that DDSN is taken care of and make sure that, we're looked out for.
And that we move to fee for service.
That's correct.
He understands that is
That is our desire,
Yeah.
and it is the governor's desire.
Fervent desire.
Well, then with that stated, then that means that even after the contract is signed, he would be open-minded
To
Right.
looking at.
I know, that was my whole
We
question.
can keep
Right.
moving forward.
Yeah, right.
And
Even if we don't get it on the first draft, we can ask for the amendment.
that's right.
Yeah. We're not hurt by asking for amendment, that's fact, we just have to decide whether we want to approve the first draft.
Correct.
Right.
And we're not quite at that stage.
No.
Okay.
So we should be next month.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then let's plan on that next month.
We good?
Okay, so just as a note, let's go ahead and put that on the, agenda, thank you, couldn't think of the word, the agenda under old business for next month. Okay, next, Pat, an update on the ICF, deficits and rates situation.
This issue popped up early this calendar year, and we're hoping to have an analysis done by the next commission meeting in May. This is just time to give you a warm-up as to what's coming. We have a provider out there with 2 ICFs each containing 8 individuals, and they advise that the community ICF rate is so insufficient that they're going to basically stop providing services on June 30th. Obviously, rates have been a chronic problem in this agency, and we're trying to get them squared away. We looked at fiscal year 20 cost reports, which we just got for these providers with ICFs, and I think I sent it out previously. Essentially, system-wide there's $47 million in revenue that goes out to about 17 providers, and they have 58 ICFs. They collectively lost $4 million, and a couple of them made a small amount of surplus, and the vast majority lost several $100,000. So on its surface, it looks like it's an insufficient rate. But again, we have to validate that and come up with a course of action, not just looking at this one provider situation. We have to look at the entire system. And so we're currently going to do a sample of 6 providers, probably 11 ICFs, and we're going to validate cost reports to see if there's allocation issues or revenue issues. We're also going to go in and look at the differences of the ones that made a surplus and those that didn't, and look at from an operational efficiency standpoint, what's driving that? Is it the acuity of the individual served, or is it possibly some staffing issues? And after we look at those 2 issues, we have to make some determination as to, is the rate insufficient? And if it is, what are we going to do about it? And I think from a provider perspective, the fact that we're leaving the capitated model, where there were some bands that had some positive influences, such as the B's and I's, and now this one has a negative. They're a little more sensitive to, hey, we have a band that has systemic deficits. How are you going to help us? So we need to understand it, come back with some recommendations, hopefully in May, so that we can make some determinations before this one provider actually follows through on their written statement that they're going to stop serving these individuals on June 30th.
Allegedly.
So let's, we're making our plans, but are we also putting contingency plans in that we don't get something done and they follow through with that? That would then fall back on the agency, right?
There are certain things in the contract where they have to provide transition time.
Yeah.
If we think we're at an impasse, then our job is going to be to find someone else to provide the services, and that's the next step.
Right.
We're not quite there yet. We've actually been through this kind of last summer. There was it was bubbling along.
What is it with Ralph's group, with Ralph Courtney's agency? Wasn't that where it was, where we had the ICF issue?
That was several years ago.
Right.
Yes. But this same provider last summer kind of made some motions, and then they got adequate PPP loans, and I think that kind of tided them over this year. But now they're looking at long-term finances. And again, this is just a short-term solution. The long-term solution is to get a community ICF rate. And part of the Mercer report, they did not look at ICF. They decided not to look at it, and we've re-engaged them on all the other rates, and we met with them earlier this week. And we want to get together with Mercer to develop a community ICF market rate. And with this, results of this will give us some good evidence, but that has to be high on everybody's priority, because we're always, just when we kind of fix it, it catches us up almost, and then we get behind so quick. And if we do not get this setting comfortable, people are going to provide, they're going to start converting to CRCFs like they have in the past. And this is one of the gateways of getting people from the regional centers back into the community. So it's an important setting that has really never been quite adequately funded, especially when you compare it to CTH2. There's only like a $6,000 difference, yet the requirements are way more than $6,000 difference. So there's a long-term solution and a short-term solution. Any questions on that?
So no motions at this time,
I think when I come next time, we may have motions. I just want to give you a warm-up that this is in the works.
But those motions would come through the finance committee, correct?
I guess they would have to, yes.
Well, I mean,
Originally, they'd come through the finance committee. They need to come, this
Wasn't it a
needs to come
topic
back
you
to the
wanted
finance
to
committee.
put on the agenda?
What's that?
Wasn't this the topic you wanted to have?
Yeah.
On the last
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has a financial issue. It's just a lot of this gets down to, we're not going to have the audits done by the first week of May. So if we want to wait till June, we can wait till June. But we gotta bring some
But we want to make sure
resolution so that the provider who is willing to turn them over we don't have to trigger that set of motions as to taking over 2 ICFs if we have a short-term solution. But we certainly will give you the update, and we'll work it through the system.
I mean, Mary, it's not necessarily required that it go through finance and audit. I mean, if there's a level of urgency that it needs to be addressed by the commission.
Well, no, actually, we
It
meet
can be
first as
brought-
a finance committee before we meet again as a.
Sure, yeah, it just depends on where the staff is as far as the information goes, as far as,
No, it doesn't have to. I'm just saying it'd be nice to because.
Sure, absolutely.
I-
100% agree,
we're talking
nice
about-
too.
We're talking about, rates and what that's gonna be and all that sort of thing. It's just a very big part of our situation and our cost reports and how that affects possible fines down the road. And we have 6 years of cost reports, as I understand it, that haven't been done yet. So anyway, it's just a lot to it, but I understand we have to address this issue somehow with this particular person.
Yeah.
I mean, that provider, not a person.
Okay, thanks for that information, Pat. Anybody else have any questions with regard to it? Okay,
Okay, if you
and then the financial update.
go to tab 9 for the financial update. Same report you look at every month. And this month I'll talk about cash flows, the revenue side of it. But this is just the expense side of it, and same old report. We're 75% through the year, and we spent about 69% of our budget expenditures. So we're under budget, and part of the under budget is being under budget. Part of the under budget is we have to do a little better job next year in our forecasting to tighten that up. I mean, part of our forecasting is when we estimate expenses, we have direct expenses that go through HHS, of which we only pay the match. So sometimes in our expenditures, we're not capturing the entire cost, we're just capturing the 30% match or the 23% match. I think hopefully next year we'll iron that out so that it'll be a little bit tighter between the budget and the actual, but still we're under budget by any measures. The most important thing we always talk about is revenue, and revenue is really hard. We have many different sources of revenue, we have fluctuations in revenue, but as we come into this time of the year, we're looking at projecting June 30th to make sure that we don't have any deficits. That's our big issue for many, many years. And this year, I'm glad to report that is not our problem. Right now, we're projecting approximately, we started the year with $12 million in cash reserves, and we did benefit from the 6.2% FMAP for the first 6 months of last year, which helped our cash reserves for last fiscal year. Coming to this fiscal year, I estimate that we'll probably be in the range of $55 million of year-end cash. Could be a couple $1 million higher, could be a couple $1 million lower. And we can attribute that to the 6.2% FMAP. We can attribute it to, we had really an increase in revenue from our daily residential rehabilitation because people could not go home or weekends or vacation with families. They were there every day, and that bumped our revenue, I think, almost $10 million. So we had some revenue, we had a few less expenses. When it comes to rolling money back into the community, most of that has been through the at-home day program in March and April, and it had to do with the way we handle the bands from March through December 31st. We left a tremendous amount of what we call funds in the at-home bands for other services, replacement services, and they were not all used to the same extent that we thought, so we lost revenue there. But all things equal, we've just been conservative this year, so we're entering next year in a very positive financial position. I want to match that with this revenue here is completely different than the 10% HCBS revenue that we're anticipating for the next 12 months that has been passed by federal legislation. The guidelines on how to implement that have not come out yet from CMS. We're kind of standing by. And once that comes out, we'll have to engage the provider community, which we have been engaged the provider community on their priorities. And actually, I think just before I walked in here, I saw an email, you see it, Constance, where human service providers and some other associations sent their recommendations to the governor's office and General Assembly on how to spend that money. And it was just a regular communication, but it's high in everybody's mind, but we haven't had any guidance on how to spend it. So my point is, going into fiscal year 22, we have large cash reserves, thanks to 6.2% FMAP and a few other odds and ends. We have the 40 million home and community-based services coming into the system. We will have most likely flat any increases from the General Assembly, which is true across all state agencies, but we'll be in a very good financial position to operate without any increases, absorb any level of effort increases, and at the same time, be in a position to support the system in many ways that in the past we've not been able to support, and options that we haven't been able to come up with because we haven't had money. So I think that's the good news, is we have many options in front of us on how to help the system financially.
And Pat, you sent us an email on, 10%.
I sent something out the other day because, I mean, the provider community is really anxious about it, and I want to let them know that we haven't heard anything yet, but as soon as it happens, we will let them know. And we've been meeting every Friday, and we stood down because guidance hasn't come out, and it's just basically national associations are recommending different ways to spend it. So we're just going to wait until we get some guidance before we regroup. And the last financial I want to give you is the Appendix K last September. HHS provided approval for all Medicaid agencies to have a 90-day retainer, which basically, if you lost revenue during the first 90 days of the pandemic, we are to reimburse them 40% of the revenue losses. Because of the way we operate, that we're the billing agent, we had to apply first. We got our money a couple of weeks ago. We got $4 million. And we calculated what the QPLs and the boards get, and it's about $2.5 million. And we anticipate paying that for the boards at the very next band payment. And the individual QPLs, we need to send them individual funding because they're not part of the band system. And that should be going out.
Where's the other 1.5?
The 1.5 extra is when we paid for at-home, the at-home lost revenue for half of March and all of April, which we absorbed.
Right.
That comes to us.
I got you. Okay, so it's basically going for what we paid.
We're covering our losses for covering those months.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Any further questions regarding the financial update? Hearing none, would entertain a motion to approve the financial statement as presented. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that statement is approved. Thank you, Pat. Next on the agenda is we'll be entering into executive session for purposes of personnel matters, including matters related to the hiring of the executive director, matters related to internal organization of the DDSN, matters related to the director of audit. I would note for everyone out there that our current plan is 30 minutes after we adjourn this regular meeting is when we'll be taking public comment. And so for those interested, that's when we come out of executive session and we adjourn. Just be aware of that for anybody who's listening who wants to participate in the public comment section. Anything else further before we go into executive session then?
Let me just ask, are we gonna completely finish the executive session and then do the public comment?
Yes. The way that was noticed was that the public comment session will start 30 minutes after the adjournment of the regular meeting.
Okay, all right, so that would, okay, got it, sorry.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yep. I just want everybody to realize that a lot of people leave during executive session.
Yeah, we may be a while.
And we may be a while, right? Okay. All right, then we'll entertain a motion to move into executive session for those purposes.
So move.
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We'll be in executive session after a 7-minute recess, reconvene at 10 after.
Let's give us 10.
10, that's fine. At 50, at quarter after, at quarter after, how about that?
That works.
Reconvene at quarter after.
So should we do something with that?
Yeah. It is 3:40. This is Gary Lamel. We are rising from executive session. Let the record reflect that during executive session, we received information from our attorney. Also discussed personnel matters, but that no votes were taken, motions made while in executive session. Following up on that, would entertain a motion to approve the agency director position profile prepared by Finding Good People with 3 modifications, that on page 3, paragraph 2, that line be amended to say the commission has decided to move for a fee-for-service model, move to a fee-for-service model, which will be a significant change. On page 4, at the beginning of the second sentence of the first paragraph, it should read, as agency head, the state director serves at the pleasure of the commission and is responsible, and therefore. And then under page 5 of strategic planning, the first bullet point should read, work with the commission to set short-term and long-term strategic planning efforts. Would entertain a motion to approve that profile as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Is there any other business to come before the commission today?
We do have, of course, a public hearing.
We do have a public hearing, correct?
All right, and
correct.
could you just guide the people listening that might be waiting? for the
Yes.
timeframe?
So once we formally adjourn, which I'm expecting to be the next motion to be made, we will start a clock running, and at 30 minutes, we will be taking public comment as arranged on the proposed regs. So at this time,
Make a motion.
make a motion.
I move that we adjourn, Mr. Chairman, but it is now about almost 15 till, so we're talking about 15 after 4 o'clock when we'll go back into session for the public session.
And I've got stopwatch ready to go.
All right, very good. I move we now adjourn.
So move, a second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned and we'll reconvene in 30 minutes for public input. Thank you.